Well, maybe I'll just talk slowly for the introduction here. Welcome everybody to the second Large Outdoor Fire in the Built Environment webinar. I'm Sarah McAllister with the U.S. Forest Service, and I'm co-hosting these with my other co-leaders of the LOF&BE working group, Drs. Sayaka Suzuki and Dr. Sam Manzello. And Sayaka is our speaker today, and she's going to give us an overview of urban fire management in Japan. So just briefly about her, in addition to helping co-lead the working group, she's a staff member at the National Research Institute of Fire and Disaster, as you see on the screen there. She's also been a section editor for the Wildland Fire and Woolley Fire Encyclopedia, which is a huge effort. She's co-authored or authored more than 30 journal papers on firebrand research. She's also a board member of the Japanese Combustion Society, so she's very busy. And she very kindly offered to give an overview today for us. So with any further ado, I'll let her get going.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'm Sayaka Suzuki from National Research Institute of Fire and Disaster, Japan. And today I'm talking about overview of urban fire management in Japan. So I think Sarah introduced me about it. So it's not like really, I need to talk about myself a little bit, but just in case you don't know me. So I got degrees from the University of Tokyo, Japan. And after I got the PhD in 2009, I stayed in NIST as a guest researcher for 3 years. And since 2013, I'm like a staff member of like NRIFD. And I'm gonna talk about my institute a little bit later. And my institute is like a research institute and a part of Japanese government and a fire and disaster management agency, where my job title is officially like a technical officer. And my institute is formally called like a Fire Research Institute. So if you dig in like some old Japanese report, where like you're gonna find like names of Fire Research Institute. And I'm also co-leader of like a large outdoor fires and built environment working group with like Sarah and like Samuel Manzero. He presented like last webinar. So this is why I think I'm presenting today. And I worked on like section editor, encyclopedia and wildfires, urban interface fires as section editor. And I'm currently working as deputy section editor for like a SFP handbook. And yeah, I'm like a board member of like a Combustion Society of Japan. So about my research institute, National Research Institute of Fire and Disaster. So NRIFD was started in 1948 with the aim of protecting people and their properties from disasters. So like we work for people and we also work for firefighters. And due to the like a governmental change, 2001, it moved to be independent executive agency like any other agency in Japan. But due to the issue related to like the fact that we dealing with like disasters and we would like to help like firefighters on the fire site, and we moved back to a part of like a government again in 2006. So now we are like also under like a Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. So here is a campus, as you can see. And it's pretty, we have a lot of greens you can see, and it's separated to buildings. And number one is like a main building we call where many of the administrative staff or like a director stays. And other place I'm staying like this building, and the lab is actually this big building, and this is called Large Fire Experimental Laboratory. And this is a place like we do almost all the experiments, fire extinguish research building, but there is like a fan, so like we can do the experiments. And actually, our campus sits next to the campus of like a fire and disaster management college, where they host firefighters uh, for the class. It's not like a normal college. It's more like firefighters are showing up and like taking the course maybe like 1 month and 2 months to sometimes it's like 5 days, but then they're gonna learn some important issues when they promote it, when they're starting a new kind of job or where they need some special training. So what kind of research has been done in my institute as we deal with all the fires and all the disasters? So our staff member actually is not only experts for fires. We have the people who is experts for other stuff, including landslide or earthquake and flood. So there's a thermal mannequin, which actually we have one of the two thermal mannequins in Japan. So that we could see the PPE and how that's gonna affect human bodies. And recently we developed a new firefighting system for large oil fire disasters, so that in the case of large oil fire disasters, before personnel going into the site, we could send unmanned mobile to see the situation. Here fire risk of PV panels where we had a lot of PV panels, so there's a danger a firefighter may get injured in the case of fires. And we also offered certain urban fire simulations for a local fire department and for the research purpose for us. And recently we are working on actively under the drone. Since a drone is really helpful to see the a site. In the case of a landslide, it is sometimes dangerous to go. And in the case of urban fire, which is currently we are thinking how to effectively deploy it, but drone technology always allow us to see something we cannot see in person. So we are working on that. So let's talk about fire histories in Japan. So going back to 300 to 400 years ago, we had large fires. One of the first fires in Edo era was burned most of Edo, which is currently Tokyo, and lost more than 100,000 lives, which, as you can imagine, it's all days. Depends on the books. The number changes, and it lost a part of Edo Castle, which could never be rebuilt, since their focus was rebuilding actually the cities. They didn't have enough money or time for it. And here you can see the how they're fighting against the fire in Edo era. And at that time, we didn't really have a good technology for using the water. While we had a certain technology to using the water. So initially, until they they destroy the houses, and also there is always since it's wooden building there, a person is using a huge fan and protecting houses from a fire brands. That is really, I thought it's fascinating since I'm dealing with fire brands and even 1600s, people are trying to protect house from fire brands. So fires in either era was a lot of actually small and big fires, and for more than 1700 fires in 200 something years. So they needed to develop a proper city planning so that the house doesn't burn. So they prepared a lot of empty space and move houses to the outside city. and also needed to like use proper materials for the fire. At the time beginning of Edo era, we had a lot of such roof, and then moved to like a wood, just simple wood roof to like eventually tile roofs, and needed to develop the firefighting system. So we needed a lot of firefighters, and they formed the system for like firefighters. So I'm sorry, that is not quite uh, cool like statistics, but like so fire still continues after the Edo era. So, but like most of the fire happened like under the strong wind, and here is the statistics like a peak in like 1876 to 85, like first peak where you can see here is like mainly happening in Tokyo, but like they developed like a firefighting system in Tokyo first and implemented. So the second peak is not in Tokyo, it's actually moved to local city where the firefighting system development was a bit like delayed. So third peak here, where is it? I can't see here. It's like after the war. So unfortunately, after the war, like we delayed like a city development a little bit. So there was like shacks and like firefighting like a system wasn't recovered yet. So once there's a fire, they couldn't control it, and they lost thousands of like houses. And after that, we had really good. We got a really good firefighting system like going on, and like a house properly built. So they believe it like it's done. Then 1976, we had a Sakata fire. And after that, we also believed it's done again since we didn't have that for a long time. And then 40 years later, we had a Itaewon City fire. And one of the problem Japan has is post-earthquake fires. Japan is really post-earthquake like a prone country, and big discussion always coming to like a Kanto earthquake in 1923. Even though that was like earthquake, we lost a lot of buildings in fire. We had like a strong wind. We lost 447,000 buildings, and they counted at least like 240 spot fires. And not to mention like a firewalls claimed many lives, which is really like a famous like a HIF show art like a firewalls. Then we had a Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake in 1995. And even though again that is like an earthquake, we lost more than 7,000 buildings in fire, but wind speed were not strong. Whole time it was less than like a 4 meters per second. So now like we have to think about like fire spread happens not only like under strong wind, but also like a weak wind. So it was wind speed was like less than 4 meters per second. The like a 7,000 building lost in fire was not considered like a worst case scenario. There is a possibility we could have lost a lot more buildings if fire was much more stronger. But fast forward 2016, we had a Kumamoto earthquake. The latest, biggest one is like, but that has like only several fires. But we don't know the reason, and we may not have like fires after the like post earthquake again. So the problem is post earthquake fires is that like earthquake destroys structures. So whatever the like we have a good like causing standards for the building, once it's destroyed, it doesn't really work. So vulnerable part exposed to the outside, and not only that, once earthquake happens, it's like firefighter dealing with not only like earthquake and like fire happens, like but also like fires. So there's not like enough firefighters, and like deployment is gonna be delayed. So how about the forest fires? That's what we call like mountain fires too. But so number of forest fires. I'm sorry, this is like a Japanese year, most of the places, but like so you don't need to really know like which year is which. Like the end of like 2018, and like it's clearly reducing. But like 2007, we had the forest to like urban fires in Tohoku area. So it is possible we are like reducing the forest from fires are reducing, but like what's gonna happen to the community is not maybe not really clear. So I'm going back to experiments like Japanese researchers has done in like old eras. So Uchida, we have like a famous guy like called Professor Uchida in University of Tokyo, and he started like experiments in 1933 to 1934, and burning like a Japanese style like structures, and sometimes like one, sometimes two, and like measured temperature and thermal radiation and fire spreads and gas concentrations and wind speed. And what they wanted to know is that like there was already a data out there like from like other countries of those like when they are burning the houses like inside of temperature or radiation or like gas concentrations, but like what kind of data we can get for like a Japanese style house. We Japanese people loved like wood, but like not other countries. So like we had a lot of still like wooden houses, and they needed to know what's gonna be like for wooden houses. And they studied like temperature curves, and that could be used for the furnace test. And they after the war they did like a more and more real scale experiments in like 50s to like 70s, and they study like a time temperature curves more and the smoke concentration and the fire spread. And one picture is like one of the like old experiments and happened in 1934 where like they're burning two houses to see like how fire spreads. And that is like the other picture is they use like apartment buildings and starting fire in one room and how fire is gonna spread, how smoke is gonna move, and that's 1962. And like not only burning one houses in 1972, uh, they're burning at least more like flames, a fire spread, kind of like experiments. And this is like a aim to understand like fire spreads after the like earthquake. And they measured, of course, like various places like radiant heat, temperature, wind, and weather, and also fire brands. And but like they couldn't build like a whole house, so they used wood cribs as houses. And three experiments they were performed, and one for fire merging. So there was like a multiple like a fire source, and then one for firewall. So they thought multiple ignition would help, so it was multiple ignition, and then one for like a pure fire spread. So like a single ignition. This is a picture for like a fire spread experiment. So they ignite it in one place and they see like how fire is gonna spread. Then 1974, they burned like old abandoned houses to investigate fire spread. And two experiments happened in total. And they wanna see like fire spreads. and they measure the temperature and thermal radiation and fire brands and localize wind speed. And one of the purpose in this study is that they wanted to know how like aerial firefighting is gonna work, and how you can see from the like a sky to the fire too. So they added like a thermal video and temperature and thermal radiation measurement on the like a plane. So this is the house they bought. It's like much more like it's old houses. And unfortunately, weather wasn't incorporated like so even though they burned, a lot of smoke happened. It was a bit hard to see, as you can see from this picture. And 1998, there was an experiment like much more focusing on area firefighting, and they wanted to know the possibility of use of area firefighting in urban area, and like they could effectively extinguish the fire or suppress the fire, or maybe it's not worth it, or maybe not. So what they wanted to know is that like when and how helicopters can be used like effectively for firefighting. And what they found out is that like it needs a lot of caution when using for urban area. No matter what, there might be people, and there's a possibility like by like watering there is destroying something in urban area. And it is difficult to target and like lose a lot of water. And the roofs prevent water from actually suppressing the fire and like any debris if like a fire is under like a roofs or like in the house. And after they did a lot of experiments, of course, they wanted to like develop the fire spread like models, and like they want to simulate. They started from like empirical models, and starting with the Hamada's like elliptical fire spread model, include wind speeds and using the coefficient derived from like a fire data. And over the years, modified to adjust to like starting from like a wood house to like a fire resistant houses, and distance between houses are adjusted, and also like new fire spread data. And of course, their physics-based models were developed recently, but like regarding the simulations, like those easy going like empirical models are used for like training and planning, much more like for like where and when to place firefighters. So in Japan, there's three main laws and related to fire safety, and one is a Fire Service Act and how to fight fires effectively, and the other is a building standard law and how to make like houses fire resistant. And City Planning Act is like how to effectively plan safe communities. So when we talked about like city planning, like which area is like dangerous, which area is like okay, or those kind of stuff. And based on that, they gotta decide what kind of materials they could use. And as I work for like NRFD and then like FDMA, Fire Service Act is where like it's related to me, and like where I'm not directly involved with it, where we care. And Japan has like a certain features, and we still love the like wooden houses and the buildings. We are trying to have more wood houses and buildings. And Japanese style roof tiles are a little bit more unique than normal like a flat tile. It has like a weird shape for like even like a profiled like a roof tiles. And we have the area which is called mokumitsu. It's in Japanese, so like an area like where like old wooden buildings are densely built. since old houses are like old wooden houses are not quite fire resistant. We have the fire resistant wooden houses, but like if it's like old, they really didn't need to. Uh, they didn't have it, so like we have old wooden houses where it's just weak to any fires. So what government and like local office does is that like rebuilding and renovating houses to become more fire resistant, and new city planning to include some like Funenka, we call it area ratio. The Funenka area ratio is where like a ratio of like empty space and also Funenka ratio. So Funenka is that like it's the fire resistant. So we would like to make the city more like fire resistant, and the more we would like to have the more fire resistant buildings. So what they do is that like we gonna plan that like have like wider roads so that there's gonna be fire break, and like firefighter could go in the like areas more easily. And if it's like a densely built and clearly there's like a really narrow road where like it is hard for firefighters to going into, and we will making like a more fire resistant buildings either rebuild or renovate. And we're gonna have like a parks and trees. So empty space serves as like a fire break, and the tree as like if it's like a green, it could be fire could be stopped with trees. So in the urban area where it is like similar to like wildland urban interface fires in the urban side. So structure to structure fire spread in Japan like spent a lot of effort to understand like a direct flame contact and thermal radiation by studying and then also experiments and structure bands. And unfortunately, fire brands are always interest, but a bit behind in terms of research and understanding compared to those two. Then I went to Itoigawa City for like an investigation in 2006, and we lost 147 buildings. But as you can see, like there's actually sea, so it could be like going worse if there was no sea and the city continues. And we had a lot of fire brands and at least like 10 spot fires, but there was like only minor injury. And because like we had early evacuation warning via like wireless radio system and home receiver, and also like police and like visited like each houses to ensure evacuation. And where is Itoigawa City? Is that it's Japan seaside, and they had like a hot summer and snowy and windy winter. And Udon Arcade is really popular where fire safety point of view, it's easy to fire like run through it and like spread the like fire. So this area is fire prone or not. It's like they had a lot of fires and they lost a lot of structures over the course of years. The last one was like a 1932 before Itoigawa City fire in 2016, and they didn't have it like 80 years. But most of affected houses built just after the like 1932, so as you can imagine, it is quite old. So I went investigation. I learned some tradition, and I was told that's tradition like I should pass to like a new generation in my institute is that we walked along the bond area and investigated why fires stopped in like each area. So for example, there was like a firefighters and suppression efforts, or like empty land which fire couldn't like spread, or like RC buildings. So I walked along those areas and talking with people, investigating the sites, and we made those maps, which is not completed, but at this time, but like we have the those maps like each fires, so we could learn like how fire stopping is like changing or those kind of like stuff. So when they talk about Itoiga City fire, there's one structure everybody talked about since uh, that structure survived in the fire. As you can see, the fire uh, next to it, and that it burned, but like that it's still standing, and there's uh, behind it like they lost like buildings. So just called like a fire resistant house, and they, according to the resident, they used better sidings and window with wires and better roofing. But the rumor is that like it cost like a double for like compared to like a normal houses. But like not only that, at least like this building was lucky. They had like a parking space and like a backyard. And volunteer firefighters had like a lot of efforts on like watering that house too. So as a firebrand expert, so I also collected firebrand data from Itoigawa City Fire, and we collected in different places and compare that's gonna make any difference or not. And also, as you may know, like we have a firebrand generator called Dragon to produce firebrands. So we would like to check our Dragon is producing similar firebrand or not compared to like like a real fire. So I went there and I collected fires. And so far, like a Dragon seems doing like a good job producing a firebrand, like a good size of like a firebrand. But so I'm happy about that. So what we learned from this fire is that like even though we thought it's done, we need more preparation for like large urban fires. We thought Sakata fire would be the last, but like a lot of similar area like those Mokomitsu place still exist. So once we have fire, we might have like a big fire, and the fire brands are still like an issue, even though we made like a lot of like houses fire resistant, and we use like tiles for like a roof, but like we still need to do something with protection, and we have to locate firefighting resources correctly. But we need probably like a more good strategy and tactics. Since fire, like number of firefighters is decreasing, and the firefighter system itself has a little bit of like a problem because of the aging society. And we also have to think about how to deal with like existing buildings, since new building needs to like follow the new codes and standards, but like old building doesn't need to. So we just have to know how to dealing with it. And we FDMA issued some official memos, and this is the example of like official memo looks like. And that is how to fight fires and a strong wind, updated official memo from 1955. Others include how to identify the high risk area for large urban fires, and how to strengthen collaboration among fire departments, and how to secure water supply with local industries. Since Itoigawa the case, like eventually they needed more water, so they got help from local industries. And this kind of like official memo is harder to understand sometimes. And especially if you are volunteer firefighters and not official firefighters, it is like difficult, or like you may not have enough time to understand it. So FDMA made a video for firefighters and what is like a firebrand looks like. And this should be like how firebrand looks like. Or, okay, where is it? Sorry. Which I wanna show something. And looks like, and how it looked like really. And like they included like a video, my collaboration with like a nest, and where they gonna be, okay, it is more, they made those kind of how it looks like, and what kind of places you have to be careful. Those are bad roofs, clearly, like you're gonna get firebrands and ignition. They have to take care of it, and but like also like if you're a firefighter, those are the places you should look for it. But I could just show it like another 10 minutes, but I will going forward. So what we learned from also investigation is that roof still seems ignited by firebrands, and at least like 3 houses we could see which was like not burned down, had like a spot fires, and roofs were half destroyed. Not only like a fire, like a firebrand, and also like a suppression efforts. And because it's destroyed and it's burned, where exactly ignited was still unknown. But top seems a problem and the field seems a problem. So we did experiments with also Japanese roof, experiments with like the NIST firebrand generator, and comparing the data with like a 6 meter and a 9 meter. 9 meter is close to Itoiga fire condition. So this is what it is. And like it turns out like a Japanese style tile, it's not really strong to like a firebrands compared to other stuff. So that is like why like SM's got ignition. And next I recently, or like a year ago, like we went to like a Shurijo Castle fire, and that is like October 31st, like 2019, and burned 8 buildings. Buildings were made from like a wood as well as RC with like a wood. And a lot of fire brands were observed, so evacuation was recommended. Wind speed wasn't high, like a 45 meters per second, but a high humidity. And this is like supposed to be standing. This building is supposed to be standing here. Then when I arrived, it was actually they start cleaning up the site. So there was a lot of debris for the investigation purpose. And how it was bad is that like burned buildings and like melted temporary bows, and the cone is like melted, and half burned trees. Like that is in Okinawa and the south part of it. It is really like humid. So it's still surprising to like trees are half burned. It's clearly from the radiation since in the half like it stopped. Then those are the 8 buildings. It was destroyed, the red squares, and there was a lot of fire burns, so was observed. So I went to collect fire brands too. So there was like some pictures of like a fire brands, and the fire brands could like make like a char marks, but at the same time it didn't spread. So no matter what, like humidity was like 60-70%. It was warm, but it was really humid. And also and the firebrands were like seen like on the like leaves. And then as there was like a lot of like a forest, a lot of firebrands are caught on the like trees too. So I collected like a size of firebrand and compared. So first, like I always like compare the like depends on the location. There is the difference or not, and depends on the location. There is slightly difference, but like I'm still thinking about what's gonna be the reason. But it's like that. And next, comparing with the like actual other actual fires. So there was like a Bep City fire happened a while ago, and Itoigawa City fire, and Bep City fire and Itoigawa City fire happened under the strong wind. So the wind condition is quite different, but it seems relatively good match among the like firebrands size and like masses. And we always like want to improve like a dragon, so we compare the data with like a dragon. Dragon is like producing like a reasonable size firebrands or not. So it turns out firebrands from dragon seems relatively good, but like Shurijo Castle, like they produced a lot of like larger firebrands too, but like a lot of firebrands stuck in the like trees and like everything, and it's actually not concrete. I had to collect from like a grass on the grass or somewhere. So it is possible I also missed a lot of smaller firebrands too. But like it is clearly they produced a lot of larger firebrands. That could be something to consider in the future. So, but there was no spot fires at all, despite the fact like a lot of firebrands were observed. So the reason is that Okinawa is like a typhoon-prone area, and roof is like really secured with stucco or cemento. As you can see, they're stored like securing the like on the cemento, and due to the humidity and like wooden houses are not common. Much more like they prefer like RC or like a concrete. So this is, I think, the reason they didn't ignite, but like there could be a lot of other reasons. So I'm wrapping up like my talk, and like I hope you're gonna join the next seminar too. Next seminar is gonna be done by like Amy Christensen from NRC Canada, and it's like January. It's gonna be really interesting, so I hope you'll join. And thank you. That's it.